So let's talk about one big and scary power move stratagem combo that's pretty high investment but also has the option to potentially swing a big combat and maybe even the game. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about a stratagem combo that I've seen on the tabletop a fair few times. It has the potential to be a really big deal, with melee armies getting a big leg up compared with their contemporaries, and in particular I was inspired to make this video after a comment on my Dark Angels video, bringing up the potential combo for use with Lionel Johnson, and a good reason that you might want to put him in Deep Strike. This way is one potentially interesting way to get more value out of the rapid ingress stratagem, which just in itself can be a really quite big and interesting game-changing swing for getting deep strike or reserve troops into melee very easily. Generally the idea behind this one is that you have some sort of melee unit in deep strike reserve. The opponent has their movement phase and then moves around all their units, and then you use this one command point stratagem to bring your unit on out of reserves, and you set it up somewhere safe. The enemy is just about to have their shooting phase and might charge after, so ideally you might want to be somewhere between 9 to 12 inches away from the enemy units, and also ideally out of line of sight behind ruins, so the opposing player doesn't just light up your freshly arrived unit with a whole bunch of firepower. It can depend a bit on the units that you might get the opportunity to charge against, and also exactly where the terrain is on the board. But it's at least got a strong potential to allow units to turn up and then basically get a near enough guaranteed charge the next turn after you move towards the enemy and then charge them at very close range, in particular for anything that's got big damage in melee, but it's also really quite slow. Ideally also has the deep strike keyword as well. It can be a great way to deliver them, and you can certainly use it on things without deep strike as well, just being more limited to the more standard strategic reserve board edges. For a scary melee unit in deep strike reserve though, that isn't the only potential option that you could do with it. As well as just being in a position to deal damage in the next turn, you might be able to get some advantages for other things that they can do in the enemy turn. Different data sheets might have different interesting effects. It's quite a big deal when you could have something that could act out of sequence in an unusual way and then suddenly have that perfectly positioned after you know where your opponent's moving in their turn. One of the absolute biggest deals for that could be heroic intervention, and that basically means that as well as having your rapid ingress unit threatening to charge in your own next turn, you might also be able to set up a threat so it basically annoys an enemy charge to the point where it might be a really good idea if you didn't have the heroic intervention threat, and then turn into a really bad idea as soon as your unit's rapid ingressed and turned up. Heroic intervention in itself is certainly a really powerful stratagem. Previously at the start of the edition it was 2 command points, so it came up kind of rarely. Around about a year ago now, Games Workshop dropped the cost down to 1 command point. It basically lets you do a sort of counter charge in the enemy turn if they charge one of your units nearby. Provided the intervening unit is within 6 inches of it, you basically get to counter charge for that 1 command point, moving your own unit up into melee with them. They don't get the fight's first bonus for charging, but it basically means that all of a sudden your opponent's got to deal with both units in that fight and not just one. And it means that, say, if they've charged a weak unit next to a scary melee support unit, that melee support unit can just jump up and hit the enemy squad hard. It's not always the best idea if the opponent might be able to have enough damage to maul both of your units at once, but if they've only got enough damage to take out one, then you basically get some free strike backs at them all very nicely. And for certain units, say with fights first, you might even be able to take out the enemy units before they even get to attack. At the very start of the edition, it was kind of niche to be used, as 2 command points was a bit on the uncertain side, and it might not have lasted the entire turn with that many in the bank to throw at it, but now it's far more common. As mentioned though, it can certainly be interesting that you can basically perfectly position a unit to heroic intervene during the enemy turn via rapid ingress, and then threaten to use the 1 command point heroic intervention to jump into combat with that enemy unit that was clearly lining up to charge. It's still going to be a big investment thing for most armies. That'll be 2 command points, 1 for the rapid ingress, and then 1 for the heroic intervention, provided the opponent doesn't change their mind. It could be made a little cheaper. Some units can either freely heroic intervene or rapid ingress, and some like captains might be able to discount a stratagem's cost. Just for an example situation though, here's a unit of 3 World Eaters 8-bound. They're just about to charge a Dark Angels unit on the front of their army, a depleted unit of Inner Circle companions. If nothing happens with this one, there's a pretty reasonable chance the 8-bound just make their charge and destroy them all in just 1 activation. If you had a scary reserve unit that you wanted to throw into the fight though, then maybe for example the Dark Angels player has this squad of Deathwing Knights waiting in the wings. And given that the World Eaters are a fair way away from those Inner Circle companions, they can drop at 9 inches without being screened too hard, literally just behind the Inner Circle companions, and basically if the World Eaters charge the Inner Circle companions, they're going to be in near guaranteed heroic intervention range of the Deathwing Knights. The World Eaters player might reconsider their 8-bounds life choices, but if they don't and just want to charge in yelling blood for the Blood God, then they'll probably make their charge into the Inner Circle companions. Then the Deathwing Knights spend a command point on heroic intervention, Given the damage profiles, the World Eaters might well still wipe out the Inner Circle companions. If they throw the damage into the Deathwing Knights, they're probably not going to do a crazy amount to them. Their damage to attacks just aren't really that standout, given the Deathwing Knights -1 damage that they get. Perhaps they kill a Knight or two, perhaps not. Either way though, in the balance of probabilities, the Deathwing Knights will probably be able to have enough force to activate back, have a seriously good chance to wipe out the 8-bound, and then hopefully be in a really good place at the forefront of the World Eaters army, where they can move up and press the attack with whatever's left, and hopefully have both killed a World Eaters unit in the enemy turn, and then go on to slay another one in the World Eaters player turn. It's certainly been expensive for 2 command points, but basically means that the Deathwing Knights have essentially got an extra free activation in close combat, and taking out 1 additional unit before going on to slay more, hopefully. If the World Eaters player chose not to charge, it still wouldn't be the best thing in the world for them. That's basically they've got their big fighting elite melee units at the very front of the army, and then rather than even destroying 1 unit, they've just sat in the open, all ready to either be charged by the Deathwing Knights, or even just have them go after something completely different and the Dark Angels player just shoot them down or something. That's just one potential example for a really big tough fighter unit that can almost always do this quite well. It could potentially work even better though if the threat that you've got has fights first, say for example Lionel Johnson as mentioned earlier. If we did the exact same thing with the Inner Circle companions and the 8-bound there, then perhaps this time the 8-bound charge, then the Lion Heroic intervenes into them, and he gets fights first, and due to the order of selections he'd get the chance to be picked before the 8-bound, so he might just activate and literally destroy all of them, and for this one the World Eaters player potentially doesn't even kill any Inner Circle companions at all. They've just flat out lost one of their own units in their turn, as opposed to the more predictable outcome that was destroying theirs. Obviously the Dark Angels player has committed far more units to this area of the battlefield and more points and stratagems, but in this case the commitment seems to be very well rewarded with one big enormous swing in the game. It's not necessarily going to be an option that every army in the game is going to get good value out of, but in general if your army's got a big, tough and scary unit that can deep strike in, then it could well be an option, and in particular bonus points for anything that has fights first, free heroic intervention or free rapid ingress. I've had this done to me with Squighog boys before, rapid ingressing in to jump into a key combat, and they get free heroic intervention with their character. They perhaps fit the bill well, that with a big unit of those, you're not going to kill them in one activation with most things in the game. The Tyranid Lictor could potentially be an interesting opportunistic one. That gets free rapid ingress, and it's got a fights first profile with a bunch of damage 2 attacks as well. Certainly could be enough to tip a combat with a bunch of Space Marines from a defeat to a victory if the opponent's got to deal with 1 more of them than they thought they had to. And feels like some armies could build for it fairly well as well. Maybe things like Deathwatch veterans with a Judas here for the fights first, and he could take the Beacon Angelus for deep strike and free rapid ingress. So again, that'd be a big powerful melee squad with fights first that can drop in for free, so you only need to spend the 1 command point on the heroic intervention, presuming the opponent doesn't decide against charging. Perhaps worth mentioning the Sanguinor in with this as well for the Blood Angels, as he basically gets this trick, but for absolute guarantees and with a fights first, the opponent charges one of your friendly units, and then the Sanguinor just appears in melee with them, potentially at an awkward spot in engagement range with the squad, and then cuts down a whole bunch of them with that uncommon broadsword, ideally doing enough to tip the combat and saving the unit that the opponent just charged. Overall though, just bear in mind it's another option for rapid ingress melee units, both ones that you might have and ones that your opponent might have. They can just literally arrive normally, maybe jump on objectives, do some shooting and risk 9-inch charges, which still have around about a 50-50 chance to get in with a command point reroll. Less reliable but certainly enormous when they work. They can rapid ingress somewhere threatening, drop in behind terrain or out of line of sight of big guns, and then just moving up to make combat in the normal way, or potentially to threaten to set up for heroic intervention, perhaps dropping down somewhere where you were just about to charge, and then meaning that your charge turns from a favourable fight to an unfavourable one, either killing an enemy unit in reserve or even killing them before they get to attack if your rapid ingress thing has fights first. I feel like that's the most common way that I've seen the manoeuvre used. Potentially though, anything else that triggers in the enemy turn could also be big. I played one game where someone used it to set up for Overwatch against me. If you got a unit that could rapid ingress and has particularly savage Overwatch, it could be another really big deal way to make a charging unit absolutely pay for doing so. Say for example some Drukhari Incubi were about to charge one of your demon units, so you rapid ingress flamers somewhere within guaranteed Overwatch range for them, and then if they choose to charge they're probably just going to get absolutely cooked by a bunch of Warp Flame. And if they choose not to charge, that's probably still going to happen, but by the Flamer's next turn. Again, could be a really painful 1-2 punch, but I think to make it overall worth it, you will need something that's got reliable Overwatch damage. I feel like it'd be a bit brave to be spending 2 command points on a big all or nothing, where if you do get 1 key hit, it might slay an important unit, but there's a very good chance that you just might not. In any case though, let me know what you make of the combo. Have you ever used this yourself or had this used against you? I look forward to hearing all your thoughts, any other good units for it, and any other interesting out of sequence things that you could set up with rapid ingress, getting perfect positioning in the enemy turn. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel, then feel free to check out the Patreon page, that's linked down in the video description. Channel patrons get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.